So, Preston, the one thing I always get, the one question I always get, because I remember a while ago you were telling me how at your job, when Thrones was going on, you and your coworkers would gather up at the water cooler and discuss the latest episode.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't actually have a water cooler that people stand around, but yes, people would seek me out. They'd stop by my cube or whatever, stop me at the elevator and say like, "Oh
Hmm.
yeah, Game of Thrones guy. Do you know about what do you think of the that episode? It was awesome, right? You know, and that kind of yeah, yeah, that would happen.
Game of Thrones guy. Do your coworkers know you do like the whole YouTube thing?
A few do, yeah, a few, yeah.
I would keep that low key, but one of the questions I always get, whether it's on Patreon or Discord, is when did Game of Thrones really start getting bad? Like when did it jump the shark? What moment was it where it just flipped into a very bad show? Now, if you ask a lot of people, they'll tell you season five, and I would argue season five is where you started to see a drop in quality, but it wasn't apparent that it had jumped the shark.
Hmm.
Um, I know you have your own opinion on where it jumped, and it's very different from mine.
I mean, I have where I think it started going downhill, but I think it's going to surprise you, and be very different from your answer. Yeah.
Before you go into that, for our a non-American audience, basically the term "jump the shark" is a moment in a show's history when it goes downhill. Like something happens in it, and they just start going downhill. The term originated with this man named John Hine, who does radio stuff with the Howard Stern Show, a show I like to listen to every now and then. And it's about it comes from the television show Happy Days, where the Fonz gets on like skis and jumps over a shark,
Water
and
skis.
he's
Yeah, yeah.
water skis, and he cites that moment as when the show truly started going downhill. Like right after that episode, everything just started not being good.
No, I mean the now there's kind of the loose definition that it starts going downhill, but also like if you're going true to the definition of jump the shark, it's also there's overly sensational, ridiculous moment where it's very clear that the writers are out of ideas and like have thrown in this like crazy moment, and then after that there's nothing left. Like the suspension of disbelief, like everything has just been shattered. There's nowhere to go with the characters. So, I mean, the Happy Days, it's ridiculous because this is a show about, teenage boys who hang around a diner, um, getting into various hijinks that are normal sitcom hijinks, like, oh, Richie has two dates to the prom, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden it gets a little more ridiculous, they introduce aliens and this episode, the Fonz, he's wearing a leather jacket and he's water skiing and there's a shark. I mean, are they still Milwaukee? Is the shark in Lake Michigan? Right? I don't even know where the episode takes place. Like, did they go on vacation somewhere else and there's a shark in the water and he goes off a water ski jump? Like, why would, it's so ridiculous that you're kind of like, oh God, the show is just done. And then after that, the show sucks. Now, maybe you're just going with the kind of looser one of like, oh, it's going downhill after this moment, but there's also that trueness to like they do something so ridiculous that you kind of realize that the writers have run out of ideas.
Yeah, in regards to the meaning, I think I'm going with the former.
Okay.
So, before Game of Thrones was HBO's king, HBO had a queen, which was True Blood. And a good moment and a good example of when a show jumps the shark, I would argue, is in True Blood season 4. And they're fighting witches. It's a vampire show. And in season 4, they're fighting witches, and one of the witches puts up a barrier around her like headquarters, and they step out of this truck in like leather or wearing all black, and it's really lame. And at some point in the episode, one of the vampires takes out a rocket launcher and tries to shoot the barrier. It was so dumb, so stupid, and I just felt as though everything after that moment, it just went completely downhill and was just not good at all. Every season right after that point, even season 4 was kind of but every season right after that point was just not good at all. For me, that's when it went downhill. Now, I think Thrones has a moment like that, but at the same time, some would argue that some shows don't have a jump the shark moment, like The Wire, which I've never seen, but I've heard. The Wire, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, I heard doesn't have really much of a jump the shark moment.
Yeah. Now you've made me really angry because yes, True Blood became so ridiculous. Like the first few seasons were great, but then I just remember things like an episode would end with, someone dumping a vampire in the middle of a field in the middle of the daytime, and you're like, well, I guess he's dead. And then the next episode would start, and like a van would come out of nowhere in a field, and like they'd throw this vampire on the back and save him. And you're like, no, like there's no way that van was in the middle of a field, like it was so, oh God, that show became so horrible, so horrible. But yeah, the first few seasons were great. The second season with Ensign Rowe was really great. Anyway, yeah, God.
So Game of Thrones for you, we've discussed this briefly before.
Yeah.
But you said it was around season 4 for you was when it jumped the shark.
Yeah, see, I would go below. So most people would say season 5, but I would say season 4 is where it jumps the shark for me. And I know the exact point in which the show fell apart. Like the show was falling apart a little in that there's a lot of time being killed with the Hound and Arya walking around doing nothing that whole season.
The middle.
Yeah, but that's kind of tolerable. The thing that really like sank everything, that kind of showed what was coming, was the Yara story that season. Yeah. And if you remember, Yara sails around the world, like from the west coast of Westeros, down past Old Town, around Dorne, up the straits, all the way to the river, takes this river all the way up to the Dreadfort with this group of 50 picked men. It was a big deal. She gets to the Dreadfort. She goes down into the basement. Theon doesn't want to go. And then Ramsay shows up without a shirt on. And everyone battles Ramsay without a shirt. And then he slowly pulls out a key and slowly brings it over to a cage where dogs are inside. And Yara like loses her nerve and like outruns these dogs all the way out of the Dreadfort, gets into a boat and declares that her brother is dead. Now,
she outruns the dogs. I never understood that part. That didn't make much sense.
Or how a guy with no shirt on would ever like be able to battle a bunch of people wearing armor. Like,
well, he's very skilled and fast. I mean,
close quarter combat like that? That's ridiculous. Like, just no.
Was it in your like episode review? As he's making his monologue, the entire time you're just like, just kill him. Just throw it at him.
Just throw your axe. Just like, he's right there. Just throw it. Or when he's got his key going for the door. Like, okay, just stab him now. Stab him now. Stab right now. Just stab him. But no, nothing.
I remember Comic Book Girl 19 reviewing that episode, and she fucking hated it. She cited the reason they made that scene is so they can get a shot of Miranda's ass.
I mean,
because if you remember, the scene starts with them having sex.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I love me Miranda, but it's yeah, no, it's so bad. And at that point, you kind of are like, well, wait a minute, this is when going off book. Because remember, like at this point, season 1 is book 1, season 2 is book 2, and then they're like, okay, we gotta slow down because George isn't writing that fast. So let's take A Storm of Swords and make it into 2 seasons. And we're like,
which is it's a good idea. I actually did mind that.
Good idea. Somehow they just had Arya wandering around with the Hound, even though Arya has a lot of goddamn adventures in the Riverlands, like that they just cut. Let's cut all of her adventures in the Riverlands and just have her walking or like wandering with the Hound. Okay, fine. But so they're like, okay, we need Yara to do something. Okay, well, Yeah, let's have her sail. Okay, the writers are sitting in that room and they're like, let's have her sail around the world to save her brother and then fight a shirtless Ramsay and then have the dog thing happen. It's like that's what they did when they didn't have source material.
But here's why I disagree with that, because like, okay, that episode, I forgot which episode that was. I think it was episode 6 of season 4, I think. It was somewhere in there. And the reason I disagree with that is because a lot of cool stuff happens afterwards.
Hmm.
Like, we get the Battle of Castle Black, which was awesome,
Yeah.
and then we get the Viper in the Mountain, and then that season 4 finale was also pretty good. I'd see, and then we got some good stuff in season 5. For me, like, I don't know, I felt a lot of good stuff happened after that. Um,
I mean, not just stuff from the book. I mean, I could say like season 4 still had Pedro Pascal and his portrayal of Oberyn, and that was really great. I mean, that aspect of season 4 was really great. And because that was based on source material and Pedro Pascal was a really great actor and it worked out. But
mhm,
yeah, like I would say like when they ran out of stuff to write and they were writing on their own is when they were disastrous because they didn't know how to fill thematically, the same type of story. They didn't know how to do Game of Thrones meddling analysis, scheming kind of stuff. And so they had just stuff that just didn't make sense.
mhm. For me, my jump the shark moment is much later. It's in season 6. Now, season 6 starts off a bit shaky. I hated a good chunk of season 6 because, you cite the fact that you hated that scene because Yara could have just killed him right then and there, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I hated the King's Landing plot, because they had so many chances to knock out the High Sparrow, but they just kind of are so afraid to move
Yeah.
against this motherfucker,
Yeah.
and it just annoyed the fuck out of me. But for me, the jump the shark moment was the door, which is episode 5, the middle point of
Where
season 6.
everyone loves the door though.
That was a fine
Oh,
episode.
I see.
However, even before the door, things were a bit shaky, but still okay. It's a bit shaky, but whatever. Like, Danny coming out of the Dothraki hut, and they all bend the knee. Okay, whatever.
Right.
And you know, the Sand Snakes killing Trystane, whatever. It's shaky stuff. But right after episode 5, that's where everything that you fucking hate happens, right? So, like Dany's ridiculous and cringy speech she gives in the Dothraki Sea, which, oh my god, it was so
Yeah.
bad, it was so lame.
Right. Because like why did you need to recruit a bunch of guys you've already recruited?
Exactly. And then the weird Benjen Stark storyline, which was a huge mystery for a large part of the show's history, and then it's barely touched on and
Oh
just kind of
yeah.
left alone until next season, where it also goes nowhere and it's just a huge letdown. What else? And then episode 7, what happens there? Well, the waif viciously stabs her, but Arya survives anyway.
Oh yeah, that was pretty bad.
And
Yeah.
then afterwards, she kills the waif, goes back to the House of Black and White, tells Jaqen, fuck you, I'm leaving, and then he just lets her go, because of course. Oh yeah, and of course, the Blackfish is killed off screen, which is one of the worst insults you can throw at an actor on a television show known for its death scenes.
He's killed off
What?
screen, just he does his best work off screen, okay? Like escaping the twins off screen, conquering River Run off screen, and then dying off screen. I mean, there's a lot of really incredible moments in the Blackfish's life that all happen off screen.
Pretty much. But then you have episode 9 and 10, which I would argue was fairly good episodes, kinda. So the first half of episode 9, titled Battle of Bastards, is the
Mm.
Battle of Fire, which if you go back to it, it's fine, it's okay, I guess. But this was
It's kind of silly. The dragon's digging out like at that moment. It's kind of
and
silly.
the fact that it takes 3 grown dragons like 5 minutes to burn one ship, when in season 8, like they're just flying by and blowing
Yeah.
bits of fire and ships explode like that.
Yeah.
But the Battle of Weiss was, of course, friggin' awesome. And then you come to Winds of Winter. Once again, it's a fairly awesome finale. But then we get to season 7 and 8, and that needs no introduction. So this all goes down after episode 5 of season 6, The Door, which, once again, a fine
Hmm.
episode. But even then, that episode kind of has some weird moments. Like, that's also the episode where um, Kinvara comes and then nothing happens with her.
and then nothing happens with her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because the scene by itself is a very cool scene. I think, I think Kinvara, like the actress they had, did a fantastic job, and she says some really creepy stuff, and you're like, oh, where is this going? And then it goes nowhere. Like, who is this Kinvara? And nobody. Oh, well.
And that episode is also the same episode where we get Euron winning the King's Moot and him going,
Oh, God, yeah.
"Where's my nephew and niece? Let's go murder them." Ugh, so cringe. So cringe. But yes, for me, season 6, episode 5 is when it starts going completely downhill.
I mean, all those things are bad. Like undeniably, like all those things you bring up are bad. But I'm just saying, season 4 had that horrible moment with Yara, and then at that point we kind of knew, like, when writing on their own, it's gonna be horrible. Because like you think about like Dan and Dave plots, and I'm talking plots, not atmosphere, or action. Which atmosphere and action, you know what? I'm going to give them 10 out of 10s. They did some fucking fine work when it comes to design, atmosphere, action, direction. All that stuff was great. But I'm talking like writing a plot. Like even take Hard Home, everybody's fucking beloved episode, okay? Hard Home, the episode is actually kind of shitty, like plot-wise. Jon Snow arrives. He finds the Lord of Bones and just they beat him to death on sight for no fucking reason. Like, doesn't he lead people? Doesn't he have like followers?
Yeah, but Tormund's cool, so he's immune from consequences.
Right. Then they go inside. They make a bunch of like gay jokes about everybody, and then they're thinking about joining him, and then they get attacked, and then it's action. And atmosphere. Like, no, like that scene where the Night King and his whole design, and he comes down there and everybody rises up. No, I mean, beautifully done. Perfect scene. Great scene. But on paper, script-wise, like, there's nothing to that. Like, there's no excellent writing to get to that point. It was just a big action scene. And then, the Night King comes down and like Jon's watching and he makes everybody rise in front of him. Like, yeah, beautifully directed, beautiful costumes, beautiful atmosphere, beautiful music, cutting and going to credits with no music. Like, so well done. Written? Not say it's like, it's not well written. Everything else is done perfectly, but so I would say that like when they had to write for themselves, they just couldn't. It wasn't their style. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't really get George.
And I'm glad you said that because it's some of the most fair criticism of Dave and Dan I've heard, because everyone is so quick to rag on them with no substance behind it because they know, like, it's what gets the likes on the video. Just like every director, they have their strengths and weaknesses, but they couldn't just limp to the finish line just on those strengths alone. It's just not enough. And honestly, this whole conversation is making me want to do that video on why season 5 is so underrated.
And I should do an inverse video of why season 4 is overrated and still kind of crappy too.
Go for it.
I mean, I don't think it's as crappy as 5, 6, and 7, but I think there's I've seen all these cartoons of like of everything being great up until season 8 or everything being great up until season 5, and it's just not true. Like season 1 has much better quality than season 2, which has much better quality than season 3. And then there's a huge drop off to season 4, and then an enormous drop off from there to the rest.
Well, I remember disliking the middle of season 4 because the last 3, I would say the first 3 episodes of season 4 and the last 3 episodes of season 4 are fucking phenomenal. But it's just that middle part where they're trying to stretch things out. I think Arya should have gotten the Bravos in the middle of season 4. There was no point.
Why not? Yeah.
There was no point in keeping her there for as long as they did.
Or if you're gonna have her wander around, throw in one of the plots that she was in. Like, have us meet the Ghost of High Heart or the Brave Companions or that village that she and the Hound live in and for a week or whatever. Like there was a million things that they could have had her do to fill the time than just her sitting around with the Hound, picking up a rock, and then, about to bash his head, and then he like says something to her, in that cliche way of like, he's not asleep and he can see her even though he's clearly asleep and has his eyes closed. But
They could have met up with the Ghost of High Heart, like Arya and the Hound. She didn't need to be with the Brotherhood Without Banners. They could have both done that, and she could have given us some more of that fortune telling that I love so much.
yeah, I mean, why not? Just fill the time. They did other fill the time later, like why not?
Your most favorite fill the time moment with Arya is when she's down in the House of Black and White watching dead bodies.
Well, that was the other thing. Like they get into the House of Black and White, and all she's doing is washing bodies and washing the floor for how many? For 2 seasons? Like there were so many things that she could have been doing as Cat of the Canals, or as Blind Beth, or as the ugly little girl. Like I guess they got into a tiny little bit of the ugly little girl, but then they didn't even like finish that.
They kind of did Blind Beth, kind of.
They kind of did. I mean, she was begging for like an afternoon. She begged for like an afternoon, and then she got her ass kicked by the waif, and then she was taken back. But she didn't do any of the spying. That she didn't meet Sam Tarley. Like, it would have been so much more fun had Sam Tarley left when he was supposed to leave, rather than lingering at the wall, like
And getting
doing
his butt
nothing.
kicked.
Getting a butt kicked. Keep in mind that Sam and Gilly had nothing to do at the same time. So you could have had Sam and Gilly and Maester Aemon like show up in Bravos and have their adventures, with Darian the Singer, and that could have filled that. First of all, that could have filled like 3 episodes for Arya, and it would have been interesting as anything. Like Sam and Arya crossing paths and being in Bravos together. Why not? Extend it out. Even though they only briefly meet in the book, make it 3 episodes. Why not? Like have them do a bunch of stuff. Doesn't matter. It would have been more interesting than washing the floor. God damn, washing the floor. Fuck it. I just remember when I did my analysis, and it was like I timed like how long, like there was one of the episodes opened with her washing bodies for like 6 minutes. And I was like, really? Like it was really 6 minutes. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I couldn't believe it.
I've riled you up.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Mission accomplished. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you all next time. Have a good one.